Rain poured heavily across the small coastal town of Blackwater Bay. Police sirens echoed through the streets after another body was discovered behind an abandoned motel. Inside a dim cafe, 19-year-old Ivy sat quietly near the window, stirring her coffee with trembling fingers. Her best friend Zoe leaned closer. "Another one?" Zoe whispered. Ivy nodded slowly. "They said the victim was some businessman from out of town." Zoe shivered. "That's the 6th body this year." Outside, lightning flashed. Ivy looked terrified. Chapter 2. The Mask. Beneath the bed. At home, Ivy locked every door and shut every curtain. She walked into her bedroom and pulled a wooden box from beneath her bed. Inside rested a cracked white mask with black stitched lips. Beside it, a hunting knife, newspaper clippings, photos of missing children, handwritten names. Every victim had a secret. Every victim deserved punishment. Ivy touched the mask gently, then smiled. Chapter 3. Detective Alden arrives. The town police department received help from a young detective transferred from Manila. Detective Alden Reyes, sharp jawline, calm eyes, too observant. At the crime scene, he crouched beside the latest victim. "No robbery," he muttered. "No sexual assault." 2. He examined the deep cuts. "This killer chooses targets carefully." The other officers laughed. "A serial killer with morals?" Alden remained silent. Something felt wrong. Chapter 4. The Predator in the Arcade. A middle-aged man watched teenage girls inside an old arcade. Ivy noticed him immediately. She pretended to be shy, weak, alone. The man offered her a ride home. Ivy smiled nervously. "Okay." 3 hours later, police found the man hanging upside down inside an abandoned warehouse. Words were carved into the wall. "Monsters hide in human skin." Chapter 5. Zoe's doubts. Zoe began noticing strange bruises on Ivy's arms. "Are you okay?" Ivy quickly covered them. "I fell." But Zoe saw something else. Blood beneath Ivy's fingernails. Chapter 6. The Kidnapper's Basement. A little boy had vanished. Police searched everywhere. Ivy found him first. She followed whispers through an abandoned farmhouse. Inside the basement sat the missing child. The kidnapper smiled at Ivy. "You came alone?" He never realized she wanted exactly that. The screams lasted all night. Chapter 7. The news spreads. The city woke to fear before it woke to answers. By sunrise, every news station carried the same headline across glowing television screens. Another predator found dead. The details were always incomplete. Authorities refused to release too much information, but the public pieced together enough to understand the pattern. Every victim had a history: missing reports, sealed complaints, dropped investigations, whispers no one had listened to until it was too late. And now they were dying. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no clear footage, only shadows. On late-night broadcasts, reporters spoke in lowered voices, as if saying her name too loudly might summon her. "The internet has given the unidentified vigilante a new nickname," one anchor announced carefully. "People are calling her the Ghost Girl." The name spread like wildfire. Within hours, hashtags flooded social media. Some posts painted her as a monster. Others worshipped her like Justice Reborn. Grainy videos appeared online claiming to show a pale young woman standing beneath streetlights before vanishing moments later. Forums exploded with theories. Some believed she was part of a secret organization. Others insisted she was supernatural. A ghost, an angel, a demon. Nobody agreed on what she was, but everyone agreed on one thing. Predators were suddenly afraid. Men who once walked confidently through alleyways now checked over their shoulders. Registered offenders stopped leaving their homes after dark. Several suspects under active investigation disappeared entirely, abandoning apartments, jobs, even families overnight. The police denied any connection. Still, the disappearances continued. Parents noticed the difference first. Children who used to be escorted everywhere began walking to school without incident. Reports of attempted abductions dropped sharply within weeks. Curfews became less strict in neighborhoods that had lived in fear for years. For the first time in a long while, some families slept peacefully. Not everyone approved. Psychologists appeared on talk shows warning about vigilantism. Religious leaders called the killings sinful. Officials insisted that justice belonged in courts, not in the hands of an unknown executioner. But behind closed doors, even some officers admitted something uncomfortable. Crime had changed. One detective stared at the evidence board inside the precinct long after midnight. Photos of dead offenders lined the wall beside maps and timelines. No mistakes, no innocent victims, only monsters. "That's the part I hate most," he muttered quietly. "Whoever she is, she chooses carefully." Across the city, hidden in the dim glow of an internet cafe, a young woman sat alone beneath the flickering monitor light. Her hood shadowed most of her face. On the screen, thousands argued about her existence. Some begged for her capture. Others begged for her protection. She read every comment in silence. Then her eyes stopped on a single post written by an anonymous user. "My daughter can finally sleep without nightmares. Whoever you are, thank you." The girl stared at the words for a long time. Her expression never changed, but slowly beneath the table, her trembling hands became still. Outside, rain began falling over the sleeping city, and somewhere in the darkness, another predator realized his door was unlocked. Chapter 8. Ivy's Childhood. Flashbacks clawed through Ivy's mind every night. A locked room, rusted chains, heavy footsteps approaching slowly down a dark hallway. A little girl crying beside her, begging to go home. Years ago, Ivy escaped a trafficking ring during a police raid gone wrong. She survived. Many did not. The men responsible vanished without a trace. No arrests, no justice. But Ivy never forgot their faces. Chapter 9. Alden's Theory. Detective Alden stood silently before the evidence wall, studying the faces pinned beneath harsh fluorescent light. Every victim shared the same pattern: accused predators, abusive criminals, suspected traffickers who somehow escaped conviction. No innocent names, no random attacks. The deeper Alden investigated, the more disturbing the truth became. The killer was organized, patient, and terrifyingly precise. She chose targets society failed to punish. Alden crossed his arms, staring at the photographs. "This isn't revenge anymore," he said quietly. "She's cleaning the streets." Chapter 10. The Pier Incident. The harbor was nearly empty when Ivy crossed the old pier, the fog rolling low over the black water. A drunk tourist stumbled from a nearby bar and blocked her path, reeking of alcohol and arrogance. He laughed when she ignored him. Then he grabbed her arm tightly, pulling her closer, despite her warning stare. Witnesses later recalled hearing him shouting and Ivy whispering something they couldn't understand. Minutes later, the pier fell silent except for the crashing waves. By sunrise, fishermen hauling their nets near the docks made a horrifying discovery. Severed body parts drifting through the harbor water, stained red beneath the pale morning light. Ivy was nowhere to be found. Chapter 11. Zoe Follows. Zoe kept her distance as she followed Ivy through the rain-soaked streets of Blackwater Bay. Ivy moved quickly, silent beneath the glow of broken streetlights, never once looking back. Curiosity slowly turned into fear when Ivy slipped behind an abandoned warehouse near the docks and vanished into underground tunnels, long forgotten by the city. Zoe hesitated before following. The air below smelled of rust, seawater, and decay. Darkness swallowed the narrow passageways. Then it came. A scream echoed through the tunnels, raw, horrifying, and desperate. Zoe froze in terror as the sound continued somewhere deep beneath Blackwater Bay. Chapter 12. The Masked Figure. Zoe hid behind rusted pipes in the damp tunnel, heart pounding. A masked woman dragged a bound man across the floor, boots echoing. The stitched white mask turned slowly, staring straight at Zoe. She froze, then noticed Ivy's necklace swinging from her hand. Chapter 13. Secrets Between Friends. Zoe stepped out from the shadows, voice shaking but firm. "You're the killer!" Ivy's face collapsed into tears, not rage or denial, just sorrow. "You don't understand," she whispered. Zoe braced for excuses, for lies, for escape, but Ivy didn't run. Instead, she slowly knelt, trembling, and began to confess everything she had been hiding, every secret buried between them. Chapter 14. The Corrupt Officer. Zoe listened in stunned silence as Ivy's voice dropped, steady but hollow. A police officer, someone sworn to protect the town, had been secretly feeding children into a trafficking network for years, hiding behind his badge and routine patrols. Ivy admitted she had been tracking him long before Zoe ever realized how deep the corruption ran. The night it escalated, Ivy intercepted him during a routine patrol shift. There was no loud chase, just a quiet disappearance that no radio call ever explained. By morning, the town woke to a shocking sight at the police station parking lot. The officer was there, restrained and displayed as a brutal message that someone had finally crossed a line the system refused to touch. Zoe felt the weight of Ivy's confession settle between them. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about a hidden war happening underneath their town, one where justice had already failed long before Ivy stepped in. Chapter 15. Alden Gets Closer. Detective Alden sat alone in the evidence room, staring at pinned statements and blurred CCTV stills. The pattern was starting to fracture in a way that didn't fit the profile they had built from the beginning. Every witness account, once stripped of emotion and fear, pointed to the same unsettling detail. The figure they kept calling the killer was not the towering man everyone assumed. Descriptions repeated across different locations, different nights, small frame, quiet voice, almost gentle when spoken to in passing. Not aggressive in presence, not someone who dominated a room, someone easily overlooked, someone who could pass through crowds without drawing attention. Alden leaned back slowly, rereading the reports again and again, forcing himself to reject assumptions. The evidence didn't care about expectations. It aligned too cleanly, too consistently. And then the conclusion formed, reluctant but unavoidable. Not a man, a girl. The realization changed everything. Every prior theory, every suspect board, every profile sketch. They all shifted under that single correction. The case was no longer about finding a shadowy predator hiding in plain sight. It was about identifying someone who had never been considered dangerous enough to notice in the first place. Alden reached for a fresh sheet of paper, his hand steady but his mind racing, knowing the investigation had just entered a completely different phase. Chapter 16. Ivy's Rules. Zoe stood still, searching Ivy's face for hesitation, regret, anything human enough to hold on to. "What if you kill the wrong person?" she asked, voice tight, almost pleading. The tunnel seemed to narrow around them, the air heavier than before. Ivy didn't look away. Her expression stayed calm, controlled, almost detached. "I never do," she replied coldly, as if the possibility itself was irrelevant. Not a boast, not anger. A rule she had carved into stone and lived by without exception. Zoe felt a chill crawl up her spine. It wasn't just the answer, it was the certainty behind it. As if Ivy had already decided the truth didn't need checking, only execution. Between them, silence stretched, and Zoe realized Ivy wasn't guessing her way through this darkness. She was following rules only she understood. Chapter 17. The Hunter Online. A pattern was forming far beyond the tunnels and streets. Zoe learned from Ivy that the danger wasn't only physical, it was digital too. A group of online predators had been targeting local girls through anonymous chat rooms, hiding behind fake names and harmless profiles. Ivy had gone into their world first. She created an identity, small, believable, vulnerable. She spoke their language, waded through their traps, and let them think she was another target. The conversations always started the same way, but they never ended the same. One by one, the predators stopped responding. Accounts went silent. Messages disappeared mid-thread. Entire profiles vanished without explanation, leaving behind only unfinished conversations and growing fear among those who remained. Zoe realized this wasn't random cleanup. It was methodical, patient. Ivy wasn't just reacting to threats anymore. She was hunting them in the spaces no one thought to look. And somewhere in the digital silence, something was hunting back. Chapter 18. Blood in the Carnival. The traveling carnival brought color, music, and laughter to the town. But Ivy saw only hiding places. Among the performers and staff was a man with a hidden history, someone who preyed on children while blending into the chaos of lights and noise. Zoe tried to ignore Ivy's silence that night, but Ivy was already watching the crowd too closely, tracking movement instead of enjoying the spectacle. When the fireworks began, the sky lit up in bursts of gold and red. At the same moment, the funhouse turned into something else entirely. Screams cut through the celebration. Laughter outside continued, unaware of what was happening inside the maze of mirrors. By the time people realized something was wrong, the reflections inside the funhouse were no longer just distorted faces. Blood had streaked across the glass, turning every mirror into a warning no one could unsee. Chapter 19. Zoe's Fear. Zoe couldn't separate what she felt anymore. Love for Ivy still lingered, familiar, warm, rooted in every shared moment before the darkness. But it was now tangled with something colder. Fear. She replayed everything she had learned, every confession, every silent decision Ivy made without hesitation. The certainty, the control, the way endings always came without doubt. At night, Zoe lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of the tunnels in her memory. The same question returned again and again, sharper each time. If Ivy could decide who deserved to disappear so easily, what would ever stop her from deciding again? And worse, what if one day Zoe herself fit the wrong definition? Chapter 20. The Killer. Nobody could find. Panic spread through the town like wildfire. Every new incident deepened the obsession, and every investigation ended the same way. Empty. Police combed through every lead, every rumor, every suspect, yet the pattern remained untouched. No fingerprints, no usable DNA, no reliable witnesses. It was as if the perpetrator moved through the world without leaving proof of ever being there. They began calling her the ghost girl, invisible, untraceable, always one step ahead. Detective Alden refused to accept the pattern as perfect. While others saw absence, he searched for presence. Something overlooked, something human. Then, at one crime scene, beneath the noise of confusion and flashing lights, he found it. A silver necklace, small, deliberately simple, and suddenly the impossible felt closer to being seen. Chapter 21. The First Mistake. The subway station was packed with rushing commuters, voices echoing through tunnels, trains roaring in and out like distant thunder. In that chaos, Ivy moved like a shadow with purpose. The trafficker never saw her coming. It happened fast, too fast for most to understand what they had witnessed. A brief struggle near the platform edge, a moment of confusion, then silence, swallowed by the arriving train's sound and the crowd's shifting attention. But the station's security cameras saw more than the crowd did. For the first time, there was something undeniable. A partial image of her face, not a rumor, not a shadow. A real frame of her existence captured in cold, unblinking footage. Within hours, the police had it. Grainy, imperfect, but real. And for the first time in the entire investigation, the ghost girl had a traceable beginning. Chapter 22. Alden meets Ivy. Alden arrived at Zoe's home expecting another routine lead. Questions, clarification, maybe a name to chase. Instead, he found Ivy there. She stood slightly behind Zoe at first, quiet and reserved, almost fragile in the way she avoided taking up space. Her voice was soft when she greeted him, her manners polite, her presence unassuming, beautiful in a way that made people lower their guard without realizing it. Alden didn't. He had seen too many people who looked harmless until the truth caught up with them. He watched Ivy carefully as she spoke, noting every pause, every controlled movement, every moment she seemed to calculate rather than react. Then she looked at him directly. Just for a second, the atmosphere shifted. Something beneath her calm surface flickered, cold, alert, unreadable. Alden felt it instantly. Not guilt, not fear, danger. Chapter 23. The Warehouse Chase. The raid hit the abandoned warehouse just after midnight, sirens slicing through the fog. Officers moved in formation, sweeping rusted corridors and broken catwalks, expecting an easy containment. They were wrong. Ivy was already there, but she didn't stay to be caught. The structure itself seemed to betray the chase. Old tunnels collapsed behind her steps, forcing officers to split, lose sight, and hesitate. In the chaos, she moved with unsettling precision, slipping through gaps in concrete and steel as if she had mapped every exit long before they arrived. Gunfire erupted. Bullets shattered metal beams and sparked against stone, echoing through the hollow space. Alden pushed forward through smoke and dust, refusing to lose her again. Then, for one brief, freezing second, he saw it. A white mask turning in the darkness, staring back at him before vanishing into the collapsing tunnels. Chapter 24. Zoe gets taken. Zoe never saw it coming. The surviving trafficker had been watching, waiting, unraveling in silence after everything he had lost. When the moment came, he took her, fast, desperate, fueled by revenge rather than strategy. The message reached Ivy without delay. Something in her changed instantly. The calm precision that usually surrounded her broke, replaced by something raw and uncontrollable. Every rule she once followed seemed to collapse under the weight of one certainty. Zoe had been taken. That night, the city stopped feeling safe for anyone involved. Shadows stretched longer, streets emptied faster, and the line between justice and vengeance disappeared completely. What followed was not an investigation, it was a purge. And by morning, the people who had once controlled fear no longer had names left to use. Chapter 25. Alden learns the truth. Alden sat alone in the archive room, the fluorescent light humming above him as he spread out decades of sealed records. What he found didn't come as a single revelation, but as layers of silence carefully built over time. A missing child report that was never followed up. A trafficking investigation that lost key evidence. Police notes that contradicted themselves. Names of officers who had quietly signed off on dead ends. And buried beneath it all, Ivy's childhood file, systemic neglect, exploitation. A case that should have been urgent, reduced to paperwork, and then forgotten entirely. Alden leaned back slowly, the weight of it pressing in harder than any crime scene he had ever walked through. For years they had been chasing a result. Now he understood the origin. This wasn't where she became a suspect. This was where the system failed her first. Chapter 26. Ivy Unmasked. The operation was supposed to be another silent interception, contain the target, secure the scene, no surprises. But nothing about Ivy ever followed procedure. In the middle of the confrontation, everything fractured into motion and panic. Flashlights cut through smoke, voices overlapped, and footsteps echoed across concrete as the situation collapsed into chaos. A security guard lunged forward during the struggle. For a split second, everything aligned, the angle, the force, the movement. Ivy stumbled, her mask slipped. It wasn't dramatic at first. Just a fraction of exposed reality in a world that had only ever known her as a rumor. But that fraction was enough. The guard froze mid-motion. He knew her, not as the ghost girl, not as a case file or a warning whispered in briefing rooms, but as someone he had seen before, years ago, in a place tied to the early failures no one liked to revisit. That recognition spread faster than any alarm. For the first time since the killings began, the mystery had something the system could actually process. A face that could be named, remembered, and traced. And in that moment, Ivy was no longer just an unseen force moving through darkness. She was real. Chapter 27. Town of Fear. The moment Ivy's identity surfaced, the town didn't breathe. It fractured. News outlets repeated the same revelation on loop, each headline sharper than the last, each version stripping away any remaining doubt or comfort. People began to retrace their memories in panic. The girl from the cafe who never spoke loudly, the quiet neighbor who always nodded politely, the shy friend who blended into every background without drawing attention. Now those same memories felt poisoned by hindsight. Every harmless interaction was reinterpreted as something darker. Every ordinary detail became suspicious. Trust collapsed first in small circles, then across entire streets. Whispers turned into accusations. Accusations turned into fear. And fear turned into avoidance. Doors locked earlier, lights stayed on longer, and strangers were watched too closely. The town wasn't searching for the truth anymore. It was searching for something to blame. Chapter 28. The Final Hunt. The cliffs outside Blackwater Bay roared under the weight of the storm. Rain lashed against jagged rock, turning the ground into slick, unstable edges that seemed ready to swallow anything that slipped too close. Above, helicopters circled relentlessly. their searchlights cutting through the darkness in sweeping arcs. The entire coastline felt exposed, no shadows left to hide in, no silence left to disappear into. Down below, Ivy stood at the edge where land ended and open water began. Every step behind her had been sealed off, every exit accounted for. The police had finally compressed her world down to a single point. But there was no panic in her stillness, only calculation. Zoe's absence echoed louder than the storm in her mind, and Alden's presence tightened the net, closing in from all directions. The final hunt had not ended her path. It had simply forced it into its narrowest shape. Chapter 29. Alden's Offer. Alden stepped out of the storm alone, leaving the others behind in the distance, where radios crackled and boots struggled against wet stone. He raised his hands slowly, showing he wasn't there as an enemy, only as a man who had finally stopped running from what he understood. "I can still get you out of this," he said through the rain, voice steady but low. "I'll help you survive it. You saved people. You suffered. You deserve a chance beyond this moment." Ivy didn't move. Water streamed from her hair and coat, but her expression stayed strangely calm, as if the storm belonged to someone else. For a second, something almost human flickered in her eyes. Tiredness, maybe regret. Then she smiled, soft, broken, final. "No," she said quietly. "The moment I started killing, there was no future left for me to return to." Chapter 30. The Girl in the Sea. The cliffs of Blackwater Bay roared beneath a violent storm, waves smashing against stone like something alive and furious. Rain fell so hard it blurred the world into shifting gray shapes, and helicopter lights carved trembling paths through the darkness above. Police closed in from multiple angles, boots slipping on wet rock as they tightened the perimeter. Radios crackled with urgency, commands swallowed by wind and thunder. There was nowhere left to run. Ivy stood at the edge. Soaked hair clung to her face, rain tracing lines down her skin like quiet tears she never allowed herself to shed. Behind her, Alden stepped forward through the storm, voice breaking through the chaos. "Please!" The word didn't sound like an order or an accusation anymore. It sounded human. For a moment, everything slowed. The helicopters, the shouting, the crashing sea. All of it faded beneath something smaller. Peace, not surrender, not fear, just stillness. Ivy turned slightly as if looking at the world, one last time without judgment. Then she stepped back. Alden reached out, but distance had already decided the outcome. Her silhouette dropped into the darkness, swallowed instantly by the crashing waves below. The sea did not hesitate. The ghost girl disappeared forever. But across the country, predators continued dying, and somewhere in the darkness, another white mask waited. The end.